Welcome to part 2 of my blog, which is called Parental Alienation, Why Cafcass Inspires Little Public Confidence in Managing It. And for those who don't know me from the part 1, my name is Kedge. I am the director of the McKenzie Friend UK network. I'm a retired police chief inspector, and I've been a McKenzie Friend since 2012. And with all my blogs, my views and opinions are entirely my own. So I'm going to continue where I left off, which is critically analysing the position of Cafcass in relation to parental alienation, and then at the end coming to my own conclusions. Cafcass gives examples of parental alienation, including when a parent constantly badmouths or belittles the other, limits contact for biz discussions about them, and creating the impression that the other parent dislikes or does not love the child. But here's a problem. Based on my observations and experience over many years, when a parent presents his concerns, I see that they are generally ignored and the issue put down to parental acrimony. However, if a parent makes allegations of domestic abuse, Cafcass has to give it full consideration. There are even formal directions and processes on managing domestic abuse and harm, known as Practice Directions 12J. It's a full checklist that the court must consider, which may end up in fact-finding hearings on domestic abuse. So the issue is that the focus is primarily on allegations of domestic abuse between the two parties and any harm this has on the children. Nowhere does Practice Directions 12J even mention the words parental alienation. The principles of 12J are simply not being applied to allegations of parental alienation. In the absence of this consideration, or in the absence of a similar checklist or directions for identifying parental alienation, it is, in my opinion, simply being brushed under the carpet. Now, Cafcass explain how they deal with parental alienation through their child impact assessment framework. And I quote, "All of our assessments focus on what is happening for each child. In our work, we try to help parents in the court understand the impact of the separation and adult behaviours on the individual children and what they need to recover. This requires the support of both parents, who are encouraged to exercise their parental responsibility whenever safe and beneficial for the child." Now, in my mind, there is a clear and obvious flaw in that plan, where it states that their intervention requires the support of both parents. Because from my observations, the alienating parent either doesn't cooperate or indeed denies any allegation of parental alienation. Even when alienation would seem self-evident to the average reasonable person, the alienating parent simply repeatedly states, "I am doing everything I can to promote and encourage contact." At that point, Cafcass and the courts appear to have few answers, and that generally concludes any recommendation for further interventions, and the alienated parent is now left abandoned by the family court system. Now, in conclusion, I have to state my position in relation to my observations of Cafcass and the courts and their effectiveness in identifying and managing parental alienation. Now, as in part 1 of this blog, I wanted to explain that I draw my conclusions as a layperson who has for years been able to observe the courts and the system as an outsider. I am the public, I'm not the establishment. And I want to let people know exactly what is happening in the family courts because it lacks public transparency. Secondly, I'm not banging a drum. I'm not a victim of parental alienation. My observations are what I believe any reasonable person with my experience would also see and conclude. So, my determination is that Cafcass, although taking some small steps in the right direction, are still institutionally failing to deal with parental alienation. They have some tools, which I will examine in a later blog, but these appear superficial. The guidance and procedures of the Child Impact Assessment Framework process are confused and, in my mind, overly complicated. And perhaps my biggest criticism is that there still seems to exist little determination or even enthusiasm to address the issue of parental alienation effectively, both by the organisation and by individual officers. You see, I want to see Cafcass being the champions of identifying and eliminating parental alienation. It needs to be one of their highest strategic priorities. It needs its own standalone processes and procedures, like in 12J. Sadly, I see it all too often approached as an afterthought, with continued reservations and scepticism. It seems to continue to sit in their too difficult basket where life is much easier to simply brush it under the carpet. This must change. The family court is a public service, and the public deserve far better. More seriously, when it comes to parental alienation, it is the children that are being institutionally failed and suffering often significant harm. The family court needs to be held to account for failing to effectively identify and manage that harm. Now, if you are to talk to me about any aspect of your family court case, or indeed if you are a victim of parental alienation, then please contact me and we can have a chat. I look forward to hearing from you.